Incredible twist. Federal agents exposed for arresting black council official without warrant, community reels in shock. Marcus Adams sat in the crowded city council chamber, his heart pounding in sync with the meeting's ticking clock. The air was thick with anticipation as he prepared to voice his latest initiative aimed at tackling inequity that had long afflicted his small Midwestern town. The lights overhead flickered slightly, momentarily reflecting the uncertainty lurking in the depths of his mind. He had spent countless hours advocating for the marginalized, driven by the values instilled in him by his mother. But today felt different. A creeping fear coiled tightly in his chest. What if this was the time they came for him? Little did he know, that moment was upon him. When the doors burst open, chaos erupted. Federal agents clad in dark suits stormed in, the weight of their presence choking the air. With no warrant in their hands, they advanced toward Marcus with a singular focus. He was their target. The shock rippled through the audience, eyes wide and mouths agape, whispers of disbelief swirling like a storm. He felt the earth shift beneath him, confusion intertwined with terror. The words arrest and authority echoed in his mind, but he struggled to process their meaning in such a visceral context. How could this be happening? As he stood, hands raised in bewilderment, a torrent of memories flooded his thoughts. The sacrifices his mother made, the late nights she worked to provide for him, the lessons of integrity that coursed through his veins. The passion that had fueled his fight for social equity now only amplified his fear of being branded a traitor, a villain in the eyes of a community he cherished. He was the unwavering advocate for those invisible, but now he felt exposed, vulnerable, a pawn in a game he thought he was mastering. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach, and seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. In the aftermath, whispers consumed the streets. The man who fought for them had been ensnared in something dark and twisted. Jessica Hart, Marcus's old friend and a lawyer with dreams of making a difference, felt an insatiable urge to step in. As she faced him once more after years apart, she was immediately struck by the lingering bond between them. But this was not a reunion of joy. The stakes were higher, heavy with old memories and unresolved feelings, each glance exchanging unspoken questions. Why had she abandoned her path for daring dreams? While dissecting the intricacies of his case, Jessica stumbled upon a convoluted web of bias and systemic injustice springing to life around Marcus. This was more than just an arrest. It was a strike against progress, against the person who dared to be a beacon of change. Standing at the precipice of his despair, Marcus battled against the tide of negativity. Could he lean on Jessica, someone who understood his struggle? Or would reaching out only expose the aching fractures within their past? As she delved deeper, the walls between their friendship began to threaten both their hopes. The looming secrecy of a letter from Marcus's late grandmother haunted Jessica. Her words spoke of a legacy born from indomitable strength against unfairness, a tale too powerful to ignore, too heavy to shoulder alone. The pressure mounted inside of Marcus, a burgeoning storm of emotion he'd battled since being swept into this storm. Friends had transformed into foes, loyalty twisted into a weapon. As the courtroom awaited them, tension thrummed through each pulse, questioning who would emerge victorious and what price they would pay for justice. And still, uncertainty loomed, the door to their future teetering on the edge of revelation. Marcus stood in the dimly lit room, grappling with the weight of his circumstances. The chaos from earlier echoed in his mind, each sound sharp and piercing like glass. It wasn't simply the looming presence of the federal agents that rattled him. It was the profound sense of betrayal intertwined with fear. The community he had fought to uplift now watched as the narrative spiraled beyond his control. Could he truly trust anyone? Jessica's arrival in his life after so long stirred something deep in Marcus, a flicker of hope tangled with the dread of vulnerability. When they had once been inseparable, two ambitious souls fighting against systemic barriers, life had taken them on twisted paths. She had forged a career in law, wading through dusty legal books and courtroom battles, while he had aimed to empower the marginalized from the very heart of the city council. Their choices, though different, hadn't dulled the connection they shared. Now, amidst this chaos, he wondered if their shared history could either be a solid foundation or a broken bridge. Sitting at the edge of a small table in the back of an unkempt office, he watched Jessica sift through documents, her brow furrowed in concentration. Each page seemed to reveal new layers to his predicament, a conspiracy deeply rooted in the town's history and its staunch resistance against change. The angles from which attacks had come began to take shape. They aimed not just at him, but at the progress he represented. "What do you think happened? How could they just arrest you like that?" she asked, breaking the silence. The worry etched on her face mirrored his own. "I can't wrap my mind around it. They didn't even have a warrant. It feels personal, like they're trying to send a message." His voice wavered as he spoke, revealing further doubt. Every instance of racial profiling he'd witnessed surged back, more than just shadows from the past. They were reminders of a larger battle being waged. Jessica looked up, her eyes fierce. "They might see you as a threat. You've stirred the pot, Marcus. The people you advocate for make them uncomfortable." The implication hung heavily around them. Was he truly changing anything or merely putting himself at risk? Every initiative he had launched, every speech he'd given, had drawn enemies lurking in the shadows, waiting for the perfect moment to retaliate. The whisperings of doubt turned into an inner chorus, questioning if he was making a foolish sacrifice. "I can't fight this alone anymore, Jess," he admitted, the tremor in his voice betraying his resolve. The tightness in his chest constricted further around the prospect of leaning on someone else. Unexpectedly, Jessica reached across the table, her hand gently covering his. "You don't have to. We can go through this together. You've taught me about resilience. Now let's use that strength to fight back." As he met her gaze, something shifted within him. The paralyzing fear began to transform into a fiery resolve. A surge of adrenaline coursed through his veins. Maybe he was not the only one analyzing this attack. Perhaps Jessica could provide the context he needed to rise above the current chaos. "I need to understand the bigger picture," he said, a flicker of determination igniting in his chest. "If there's a chance to dismantle whatever they've set up against me, we have to take it. I can't run away from this." Their shared commitment solidified an unspoken pact. She smiled, and in that moment they became an anchor to each other, facing encroaching uncertainty together. Just then, something in the scattered documents caught his attention, a name connected to both his arrest and a bigger network he had been unaware of. With a newfound intensity, Marcus leaned in to investigate. What if the roots of this systemic issue grew deeper than even he had fathomed? An ominous sense of urgency filled him. They were standing on the precipice of a revelation that could either liberate or destroy them, and every moment counted. The time had come to confront the forces working against him directly, to unveil the truth behind this web of deception. "Let's go. There's a lot more at stake here than just my freedom." And with that decision, he felt the swell of determination rise within, ready to face whatever lay ahead. As they stepped out of the unkempt office, Marcus took a moment to gather himself, feeling the weight of the world on his shoulders. The musty air clung to him, but it was more than the physical environment that pressed down. It was the looming threat represented by those federal agents. He glanced at Jessica, whose presence was an unexpected buoy in his sea of uncertainty. She'd brought the clarity he craved, illuminating the very path he had been hesitant to tread. "Where do we start?" Jessica asked, her voice steady despite the tumult swirling in Marcus's mind. "Let's figure out who that name belonged to," he replied, the conviction in his voice surprising even him. The documents lay scattered in his thoughts, fragments of a puzzle that had initially felt insurmountable. Each piece needed to be found, connected, and turned into a clear picture of corruption and deceit. They sat again, this time in a nearby cafe, seeking a facade of normalcy amidst the brewing storm. Far from a haven, it felt more like a battlefield, with footsteps echoing paranoia in the corners of his mind. He pulled out his phone, fingers trembling slightly as he navigated to search for the name that had pulled his focus. "Here," Marcus said, placing the phone on the table. The name, Catherine Sullivan, was more familiar than he anticipated, a former district attorney who had a reputation for bending the rules to fit her agenda. Jessica leaned in, scrutinizing the information. "She's deeply embedded in the local political scene. If she's connected to your arrest, it's not incidental. We need to dig deeper." The sudden rush of adrenaline surged through him again. The fear that had once paralyzed him transformed into a stubborn thrill. This was a chance to not only reclaim his narrative, but also potentially expose a network that had thrived on oppression. "Do you think she would go as far as to manipulate federal resources?" he pondered aloud, wrestling with the deeper implications of such an alliance. "People like her often see power as a game," Jessica replied, her tone pragmatic. "If she believes you're an obstacle, she won't hesitate to use whatever means necessary to remove you." Marcus nodded, the shadows of doubt still flickering against the fierce light of determination ignited by Jessica's resolve. "All right, we need to find out what the backlash looks like if we expose this." With a newfound sense of purpose, they dug further. As they crafted a strategic plan together, Marcus began to uncover his own reservoirs of strength and creativity. They reached out to contacts in the community, and even those within the legal realm, discreetly building a network to challenge Sullivan's maneuvers. But just as progress began to take shape, Marcus received an anonymous tip outlining a meeting where Sullivan would discuss strategies to handle public dissent. The urgency coiled tight in his chest. This was an opportunity they could not afford to miss. "Marcus," Jessica's voice broke through his racing thoughts, "we need to attend this meeting. If we can gather evidence of their tactics, we can expose them. What if it puts us further in danger?" he questioned, the sentiment laced with both fear and excitement. The stakes were already high. Attending could shift everything to an even more precarious edge. "If we don't take risks now, we risk losing everything later," she countered, the intensity in her expression feeding his burgeoning resolve. This could be the turning point. Marcus inhaled sharply. Every logical analysis wrestled with the instinct to protect himself, but beneath it all, a sense of righteousness urged him forward. "Then let's do this, together." The commitment sealed something inside him, a full embrace of both his fear and determination. He was ready to harness them as fuel to navigate his fate. With the flicker of hope ignited into a flame, they stood up in unison, prepared to confront whoever awaited them. As they made their way toward the location of the meeting, a realization washed over Marcus. The game had changed. He was no longer just a pawn on the board, but an active player, one willing to wrestle with shadows and light, no matter where it led. The door loomed before them, its threshold promising revelations that could shake the very foundations of their lives. And as they approached, Marcus felt the pulse of change quickening. What truths would emerge once they crossed that threshold? He felt the surge of both anxiety and exhilaration as they braced themselves for the unknown, and finally pushed through into the murky depths of political machination that awaited them. Inside, the room buzzed with muted conversations and the rustle of papers. But to Marcus, it felt like the calm before a storm. The dim lighting cast long shadows that danced across the walls, amplifying the tension that coiled in his gut. He noticed the unmistakable confidence with which Jessica navigated the crowd, her focus sharp as she scanned for familiar faces. His own confidence felt nowhere near hers, but the commitment he had made with her pushed him forward. As they took their places in the back corner, he couldn't shake the feeling of dread that clung to him, mingling with the adrenaline coursing through his veins. The stakes had never felt higher. He wrestled with the consequences that this meeting could have on their already fragile lives. Nevertheless, a fire ignited within him, a desire not just to survive, but to fight back, to seize control over the narrative that had unjustly ensnared him. The rustle of paper interrupted his thoughts. A familiar name, a fellow council official working alongside Sullivan, was being touted as the target of their current strategy. Marcus leaned in closer to Jessica, whose eyes widened in understanding. "It's worse than we thought," she whispered, her words barely audible against the clamor. "They're planning a smear campaign." "What do you mean?" he pressed, concern trailing each word like a shadow. "They'll discredit him publicly, frame him as a criminal, then use those public sentiments to justify their power moves. If they can do this to him, who's to say they won't do it to us?" Marcus's thoughts raced. Fear threatened to pull him back, but the image of his past, unjustly framed and silenced, flared hot within him. The time for passive observation had passed. It was now or never. As they listened closely, Marcus began to identify the nuances of the conspirators' strategies. Each whispered plan they unveiled unearthed slivers of insight into Sullivan's operational methods. He mentally cataloged the names and connections, valuable data that could be weaponized against them in the future. "Look," Jessica muttered, gesturing discreetly toward the front of the room where the meeting leader, a stout man with an authoritative demeanor, took charge. "We need to record this." His heart dropped momentarily at the risk. "Is that even legal?" he questioned, instinctively recoiling at the prospect of crossing yet another line. "Legal or not," she replied, resolve knitting her brows. "Information is power, Marcus. We don't just need evidence, we need a reason to keep fighting back." Without wasting another moment, he pulled out his phone, ensuring it was set to record. As the words spilled forth from Sullivan's associates, a litany of manipulative tactics and scapegoating, Marcus felt the weight of each deceitful strategy pressing down on him. Suddenly his attention snapped to a detail that hadn't registered before. A familiar smell invaded his senses, the tang of cheap cologne and something familiar. He turned slightly and found himself face to face with a federal agent he had seen on the night of his arrest. "Marcus," the agent's voice dripped with an unclean familiarity. "What a surprise to see you here." Panic surged through Marcus, his mind racing to process how they had been cornered. They were caught in a web far more intricate than he realized. The man's eyes glinted with malice, and as he stepped closer, a sense of betrayal enveloped Marcus. "We may have a problem if you're here," the agent continued, the threat implicit in his words. Marcus felt like a lightning rod, charged and uncertain. He needed to act decisively, to stop himself from crumbling under pressure. Suddenly, an inner resolve crystallized. He wouldn't be a victim anymore. He had the means to expose the corruption. He just had to be careful. Looking toward Jessica, he knew she had realized the implications too. Their plan was no longer just about gathering evidence, it was about survival. As the meeting progressed and the tension in the room thickened, Marcus felt that this impending confrontation with fate could lead to either liberation or disaster. Would he grasp the opportunity to fortify his own narrative, or would the shadows that haunted him consume him whole? With a determined sweep, he adjusted his grip on the phone, determined to record every moment, knowing that each second counted in the game of power they were playing. And just as the atmosphere thickened with conspiracy and impending action, a loud crash sounded from the entrance. The door burst open, and the air shifted as a new threat emerged. Everything that had built up in that room teetered on the brink of madness. What implications would this new development have for Marcus and the fragile alliance he had begun to build? The horizon opened with uncertainty and promise, and Marcus braced himself for what would come next. The door swung open violently, interrupting the carefully woven fabric of conspiracy. As Marcus's eyes locked onto the figure framed in the doorway, the storm he had sensed brewing within transformed into a realization. This was no random disruption, it was a counterstrike. A federal agent, tall and imposing, strode in, flanked by two colleagues. The tension in the room escalated, each participant caught between the urgency of the moment and the unease of having a person of authority intrude. Marcus's heart hammered against his ribcage, a panic fueled by both the new threat and the recognition that he was now part of something bigger than himself. "You," the leading agent barked, his gaze sweeping over the room with authoritative scrutiny. "Everyone stay calm. We're here to investigate corruption." A wave of uncertainty washed over Marcus. Was this an opportunity, or a complete derailment? Jessica leaned close, her breath warm against his ear. "What are they doing here? Did they follow us?" "I don't know," Marcus whispered back, focused on the unfolding spectacle while his mind churned. The presence of federal agents should mean authority, but after his personal dealings with them, all it represented to him was a slippery slope of mistrust. The agent turned sharply, locking eyes with Marcus. "You, Councilman, step forward," he commanded, his voice low but loud enough to draw unwanted attention from every corner of the room. Managing to keep his voice steady, Marcus took a deep breath and moved toward the agent, feeling the weight of everyone's eyes upon him. Each step felt like a tightrope act between bravado and vulnerability, but he could feel the pulse of determination surging within. He had something worth fighting for now. He needed to channel that into composure. As he approached, the agent smirked, a hint of recognition flashing in his eyes. "You don't remember me, do you? We had an encounter." The mention of their previous confrontation ignited a fire deep within Marcus. It summoned the memories of humiliation and betrayal. "You weren't exactly the most pleasant person in my life, were you?" A ripple of surprise passed through the crowd as murmurs erupted, speculation swirling like a storm cloud ready to unleash its fury. Marcus knew he was walking a perilous line. He needed to navigate this encounter with cunning, turning the attention on themselves and away from Jessica. "What do you want?" Marcus challenged, concealing the trembling of his insides behind a mask of defiance. The agent folded his arms across his chest, enjoying the power shift. "We're here to ask questions about your activities. Some of your colleagues haven't been forthcoming with information that might involve illegal activities." Fear pricked at the edges of Marcus's resolve, but he forced his composure to solidify. There was a balance of intrigue and danger that hung in the air, and he had to keep his wits about him. "You have no warrant to question anyone here, and I advise you to reconsider your approach." His words hung heavy in the air, a direct confrontation challenging authority. Despite the stakes climbing higher with every moment, a spark of exhilaration ignited in him. He was no longer just a pawn, he was becoming a player. "You think you can intimidate me? This isn't over, mark my words." The agent's voice dripped with menace. Marcus felt the gravity of the encounter weighing heavily on him, a moment that could shift the balance of power. The pushback fortified his resolve. He was determined not to let the agent have the last word. In that moment, something shifted. The room became witness to a deadly game of chess where he had to think several moves ahead. To outmaneuver the federal agents and maintain the integrity of their mission with Jessica, he needed to remain vigilant and strategic. The agent turned to leave, but not before tossing one last threat over his shoulder. "We'll be watching you." As the door closed behind them, the tension remained palpable. Marcus felt the room collectively exhale, but his breath stayed caught in his throat. He had avoided immediate danger for now, but the game was far from over. "Marcus," Jessica began, her voice tinged with concern. "What are we going to do?" His heart raced at the realization of the complexity of their situation. No longer could this be just a fight for survival. It was becoming a battle for their very future. He met her gaze. "We strategize, gather our evidence, and prepare for what's coming. This is just the beginning." The sense of urgency crackled in the air like electricity. As Marcus and Jessica refocused, determination ignited within him. There was work to be done and an alliance to solidify. What other secrets lay hidden beneath the surface of their precarious situation? For now, they had a plan. But would it be enough to withstand the escalating power play ahead? The tension in the room felt more suffocating after the agents left. It was as if they had taken the very air with them. Marcus stood at the center, grappling with the unnerving sensation that danger was lurking just beyond their line of sight. He understood that there was no turning back now. The conspiracy had peeled back layers of secrecy, and he had stepped into a risky game that challenged his wit, integrity, and very sense of self. He felt Jessica's hand on his shoulder, a grounding presence amid the chaos. "We need to talk to someone who knows more about them," she urged. She seemed to be channeling his urgency, her eyes brightening with a newfound purpose. This wasn't just about self-preservation anymore, it was about taking the offensive. "Who do you have in mind?" he asked, his thoughts racing ahead. Were there allies he hadn't considered? Old contacts he could exploit now? The landscapes of his trust were shifting, and he needed to navigate them carefully. "Dale Mendez," she replied, her tone firm. Dale was an old journalist who had once moved in the same circles as Marcus. His nose for corruption had earned him enemies, but he also had valuable resources, insider knowledge, connections within the law, all the things they needed to pull their gambit off. "But he's been off the grid for a while," Marcus responded, a flicker of doubt weaving through his determination. "How do we know he's even willing to help? I contacted him last week. He's been looking into some of the same leads we are. I think he'd jump at the chance to work with us," she declared. There was conviction in her voice. "It's now or never, Marcus." The resolve in her eyes sparked a fire in him. "Let's find him then. We need intel on the agents and their operations. If we can expose their lies, we might gain the upper hand." They were not just victims in this unfolding story. They were becoming strategists, navigating uncharted territories fraught with peril and opportunity. He could feel the rhythm of the chase picking up, each heartbeat synchronized with his desire to fight back. As the night engulfed the city, Marcus and Jessica set out. The streets outside were a dynamic canvas painted with flickering lights and whispers of secrets. Each place they passed now felt charged with potential, each alley a shadow that might contain answers or furtive glances from their pursuers. Hours passed, and while they searched the local bars where Dale might be found, Marcus internally battled the gnawing anxiety of what awaited them. Moral dilemmas danced through his mind. He questioned how far he was willing to go. Did he want to expose corruption to right a wrong? Or was there a part of him that craved vindication for the past grievances he had faced? At last they pushed through the door of a dimly lit pub where tensions relaxed over cheap drinks and laughter. The atmosphere felt heavy with unresolved stories, quiet mirroring the urgency of their task. They scanned the room, searching for familiar faces amid the chaos of revelry. Then in the far corner Marcus spotted him. Dale, hunched over with a drink, pen poised over a notepad, a look of deep concentration on his features. The familiar lines of determination etched into his brow were marked with age and experience. As they approached, a mixture of hope and trepidation coursed through Marcus. Would Dale still be interested in exposing the truth? Could he bridge the gap of their previous relationship, rekindling a collaboration that could make or break their case? "Dale!" Jessica called, her voice cutting through the murmur of the crowd. Dale looked up, recognition brightening his eyes, but there was an underlying skepticism. "Marcus." "Jessica." "This is surprising," he said, his tone measured yet curious. "Can we talk?" Marcus asked, the weight of desperation hitching his voice. "What makes you think I'll help you?" Dale countered, narrowing his gaze. "We need you now more than ever," Marcus replied. "The feds are already after us, but we have evidence and you can expose them." Dale leaned back, a shadow of doubt lingering on his face. "That's a dangerous game, and I'm not sure you're ready for the consequences." Marcus felt an urgent resolve snap within him. This was it. He had to convince Dale that this battle wasn't just his to fight. It was a fight for truth, for justice, for everything he believed in. But would Dale be swayed by a cause almost obscured by personal stake? The stakes had risen. As conversations dwindled around them, Marcus sensed the beginning of a pivotal engagement. "You have to trust us," he finally said. "This isn't just about exposing them. It's about reclaiming what's been lost. The time has come to face the truth." And in that moment, the echoes of past failures mingled with the thrill of potential victory. Would Dale join their fight or turn his back again? They held their breath, suspended in a critical juncture that could shift the tides of everything they were battling for. Dale's eyebrows arched slightly. It was a small gesture, but it spoke volumes, revealing his inner deliberation. Marcus watched as the journalist weighed their desperation against the weight of danger that loomed large. This wasn't merely a conversation. It symbolized the precarious balance between their past grievances and present convictions. The air crackled with unspoken thoughts, and Marcus felt his pulse quicken as he comforted himself with the notion that this was a critical juncture. potentially ripe for recruitment. "Look," Dale began, his voice firm but laced with caution. "I've been in this field long enough to know that trust comes at a premium. You two have been dragged through the mud by this system. Are you even sure of your own resolve? This could go sideways fast." Marcus felt his anger and frustration rise, a war within himself raging just beneath the surface. He wanted to yell, to scream that of course he was ready, but deep down, he recognized the kernel of truth in Dale's skepticism. He had often jumped into battles that left him grappling with the repercussions long after the smoke had cleared. "We're aware of the risks," Marcus shot back, defiance flaring in his chest. "But if we don't do something now, we'll lose everything. They're trying to silence the truth, and we can't let that happen, not again." Dale's gaze softened slightly as he regarded Marcus, as if measuring his integrity against the backdrop of shared history. He shifted in his seat, pen tapping thoughtfully on the table, yet the skepticism still hung around him like a cloud, unwilling to disperse just yet. "What kind of evidence are we talking about?" he finally asked, curiosity peeking through his guarded demeanor. With a glance at Jessica, Marcus felt a moment of clarity. "We've documented conversations, gathered archival footage, and even uncovered the corruption leading back to key figures within the agency. It's all laid out, but we need your expertise to make sense of it and get it into the light." Dale scrutinized him, the journalist's instinct evident. This wasn't merely an offer to expose a scandal. It was an invitation to dive back into a world he'd distanced himself from. For Marcus, that moment teetered on the edge of hope and desperation. He could feel the choice shimmering just out of reach, a hard question lingering for them all. Was Dale ready to risk his reputation to stand beside two troubled souls? "Let me think it over," Dale said finally, maintaining his defensive posture. "That's not good enough," Marcus replied, each word a carefully measured step toward an inevitable conclusion. "You're in this as much as we are now. If you've really been investigating these agents yourself, consider this your shot. You're risking your life if you turn back now." Dale exhaled slowly, and in that moment, Marcus realized he was confronting not just a colleague but a representation of his own fears. That seeking justice could lead to ruin and disillusionment. Even so, each conviction he'd maintained through the years surged within him, punctuating the silence that grew heavier with each passing second. "You're right," Dale finally spoke, his voice quieter yet resolute. "I've stirred too many waters not to engage now. You've made your case well, and damn it, I admire your fight. But we move on my terms. I won't be dragged down for your vendetta." "Deal," Marcus replied, the strength in his voice surprising even him. The ground felt firmer beneath his feet, and for the first time, he sensed the nascent power of collaboration blooming between them. But the moment of clarity dissolved the instant he surveyed the room. Something felt off. The laughter of patrons began to fall away into murmurs, and he noticed the myriad of eyes trained on them. The realization unfolded like a well-timed reveal in a play. They were not alone. "Jessica," he whispered, urgency threading through his tone. "We might have company." Her wide-eyed glance toward the entrance confirmed his fears, agents hidden in plain sight, mingling but distinctly focused. Dale followed their gaze, a grimace emerging. "We need to cut this short. If I'm right, they're onto you both." Marcus's mind raced, strategies colliding within him. They could flee and abandon the lead they'd barely scratched the surface of, or they could confront the agents directly and turn the tables on them, making a bold statement that might level the playing field. "Let's go," he said, weaving through the crowd toward the back exit. It's now or never. As the three of them exited the pub, the weight of their decision hung heavy. Would they emerge unscathed, or ignite a confrontation that could end everything? The night had only just begun to reveal its true dangers, and with each step away from safety, Marcus felt the gravity of the choice he had made weighing like a door slamming shut behind them. Could they truly forge a path out of this chaos, or were they simply running headlong into something far worse? The answer awaited beneath the surface. As they darted through the narrow alley, Marcus could feel the weight of their decision pushing down on him. Each step felt heavier, the knowledge that they were now on the precipice of something far greater than himself gnawing at his thoughts. Jessica matched his pace, her eyes scanning their surroundings while Dale pulled out his phone, presumably to assess what options they had left. "Where do we go now?" Jessica's voice cut through the tension, laced with urgency. "Back to my place," Marcus replied, albeit uncertainly. It was the safest location he could think of, but he was painfully aware that secrecy was now a commodity they had little of. "We can strategize there." The thought of returning to his apartment made Marcus's stomach churn. He had always pictured his sanctuary as a place where he could unwind from the chaos of his work. Now it loomed like a trap. Why hadn't he found a way to instill more confidence in his decisions? Now he was questioning not only his choices but his resolve, his ability to lead them through this upheaval without sacrificing their safety. "Stay focused," he murmured to himself, a mantra that had become increasingly vital. Each corner they turned felt like an opening into unknown dangers. They reached his inconspicuous building without incident, but the subtle tension in the air hung over them like a dark cloud. Inside, Marcus locked the door behind them, an action both mundane and crucial, and ushered them to the living room. The clutter of unread manuscripts and half-finished pieces now seemed like distractions from the task at hand. "Let's lay it all out," Dale said. There was a grit to his voice, a sense of his own unresolved inner conflict clear as day. "What evidence do we have, and how can we use it?" Reluctantly, Marcus spread the documents across the coffee table, the scattered papers representing more than just words. They were pieces of his soul. Each sheet contained fragments of their fight, each witness's statement rewriting the narrative of their lives. "Here's the scoop. We have audio clips of high-ranking officials discussing their dealings, along with images of cash transfers. They'll burn them alive if we get this right." "You speak as if we've already won," Dale challenged, a skeptical note creeping back. "What will they do to us if we fail? You saw those agents. They're relentless." Jessica interjected, her tone trembling but her conviction unwavering. "We won't fail. They rely on fear and silence. We can't let them manipulate us into retreating. We have to push forward, Dale. Your voice as a journalist is crucial here." Marcus could feel the surge of determination mixing with self-doubt, wrestling for dominance within him. Could he inspire this kind of bravery in others while still questioning whether he was ready for the full scale of confrontation ahead? Dale flipped through the document stacks, pausing at visuals that spoke to him. "Let me put something together for the public. We can't just throw this into the void. We need a plan that garners attention. Where's the humanity in the story?" Marcus caught a glimpse of the relentless optimism Dale offered, and he felt a flicker of truth. "The humanity is in the risk we take. If we don't expose them, we'll always be vulnerable to their machinations. We have to act now while we still hold the cards." With confidence building, Jessica's eyes gleamed with fervid excitement. "So we publish then? We want to make sure their power to intimidate becomes irrelevant. They can't silence the truth forever." Every word was locked onto Marcus like the final puzzle piece clicking into place. Something monumental had clicked within him. He realized that this battle wasn't just about exposing the agents. It was about reclaiming agency over their own lives, their fears, and their right to be heard. "Let's do it," Marcus said, his voice steady and undeniably emboldened. "Let's make that phone call, set up the meeting. We only get one shot at this." Moments passed as they began to formulate their strategy, but a glaring realization stabbed at Marcus, unraveling the courage he had briefly grasped. He had known fear his entire life, but now it had a face. He could see its shadow dancing on the walls of his mind, echoing his uncertainty back at him. Just as he mentally combated this internal turmoil, the sound of a car screeching to a halt outside shattered his thoughts. Heart racing, he rushed to the window. "Marcus, what is it?" Jessica said, concern etching her features. Through the glass, a swarm of black SUVs surrounded the front of his building, men in suits pouring out, their demeanor unmistakably authoritative. "They've tracked us down." The words slipped from Marcus's lips, the weight of betrayal settling in. "They're coming for us." Fear gripped him, icy fingers slithering up his spine. Would they confront this terror, or would they let it consume them? With each second that ticked away, he had to make a choice: fight or flee. The moment of truth arrived, the future unfurling before them like a darkened path. What lay beyond could lead to either their salvation or their undoing. Marcus's heartbeat reverberated in his ears, drowning out the chaos outside. The sight of the black SUVs roused a primal fear, but with it came a flicker of determination that ignited within him. The decisive moment was upon them, and instinct urged him to act, to reclaim the agency that had been slipping from his grasp. "Dale, Jessica, we need to act now," he shouted, the urgency clear in his voice. "We can't let them just waltz in here. Let's use the back entrance." "Are you serious?" Dale snapped, eyes wide with disbelief. "What are we supposed to do, run like scared rabbits? We have the evidence." "This isn't the time for bravado," Marcus replied, emotions surging. "We have a chance to get it out there, but only if we stay one step ahead. We can't face them here." He steeled himself, drawing on a deep reservoir of self-doubt he had long avoided. Until now, he had played the role of the reluctant hero, always hesitant, but he couldn't let fear dictate their actions any longer. The weight of leadership pressed down on him, but he was beginning to grasp that vulnerability was not the same as weakness. It could drive resolve. "Fine," Jessica said, her eyes darting back to the window. "Let's not waste any time. We can regroup and send the files from the safe house across town." The trio moved quickly through the kitchen, hearts racing, adrenaline pumping. Marcus led the way, feeling the determination of his companions pulse through him. In their quiet intensity, he began to see the courage he had inadvertently sparked. They were collaborators, not just followers. The realization bolstered him as they slipped into the alley behind the building. As they emerged on the other side, Marcus's mind raced with encounters of the past, moments defined by fear and doubt. This encounter was different. He had to lead, to trust in his ability to navigate through peril. The thought electrified him with both thrill and trepidation. A decision loomed over him. He had to confront the nightmare ahead. "We need to find a computer, somewhere we can send this out without getting caught," Marcus asserted, falling into an assertive rhythm. Dale nodded, vulnerability flickering across his face as he glanced back toward the chaos now surrounded by the building. "I know a place. I've got a friend." "Then let's move," Marcus said, rallying strength from the urgency of the moment. He felt the pull of accountability, the necessity of risking everything for the truth, and the flicker of hope sparked another realization within him. This wasn't just about journalism or fighting injustice, it was about their lives, his choices becoming the very armor he would wear into battle. They hustled down the dimly lit streets, each footfall echoing the resolve that began to harden within him. Fear still lurked at the edges of their focus, but it was now a companion, a relentless tide driving them forward rather than a crushing weight holding them back. At last they arrived at a nondescript building that emanated a sense of safety amidst the turmoil. Dale led them inside, urgency spilling from Marcus as he entered. "Get the files on that computer, Dale, we don't have much time." As Dale got to work, Marcus felt a twinge of doubt clawing at him again, but he pushed it away, feeding off the growing intensity in the room. This was a moment of reckoning. "Everything rides on this," Jessica echoed, her voice resolute. "We're not just doing this for us." "What if it doesn't work?" Dale asked, uncertain as he hovered between hope and fear. Marcus stepped closer, locking eyes with both of them. "It has to. Fear only wins if we let it dictate our actions. What drives us forward is the truth. We can shine a light on their darkness." Time spun into a blur of action as they waited, each tick of the clock amplifying the palpable tension wrapped around them. The distant sound of sirens began to gnaw at the silence, a potent reminder of the imminent danger closing in. Just as the computer dinged with a notification sound, the door swung open, revealing a figure cloaked in shadows, facial features obscured. "They know you're here. We need to move. Now." A chilling silence enveloped the room. Marcus's heart raced. A new wave of uncertainty surged. Who was this person? Trust was hard to come by in their world, and yet they were about to step into unknown peril once again. Would they keep running, or would they finally stand their ground? With newfound conviction, Marcus prepared to meet the storm head-on, Knowing what lay on this path could either shatter them or define who they truly were. Marcus Adams stood at the edge of confrontation, the air electrified with determination, and the unfurling realization that he had stepped into a new chapter of his life. Armed with evidence that could shake the foundations of a political web built on deceit and corruption, he felt the weight of responsibility replace fear. As the cloaked figure stepped forward, the shadows peeled away to reveal none other than Daniel Robson, an investigative journalist whose intrepid work had overshadowed Marcus's own initiatives in the past. "I heard you might need assistance," Daniel stated, his presence an unexpected but powerful ally. Marcus felt a surge of hope. This was someone who understood the stakes. "Daniel, we're exposed. We need to get this information out while we still can, but we have to move fast," Marcus expressed, urgency threading through every word. Daniel nodded sharply, immediately assessing the room's chaos. "I came prepared. We can use my collaborators' network to disseminate the evidence securely. They'll turn the tides in our favor." Marcus shared a meaningful glance with Jessica and Dale, recognition dawning upon them at the prospect of collective strength. As they filed into the next room, Marcus felt a spark of collaboration igniting among them. Each person was both a necessary part of the greater mechanism of change and an individual bringing unique strengths to the table. This newfound unity solidified his sense of purpose, no longer just fighting for his own justice but for the truth that resonated with the heartbeat of the community they aimed to protect. "All right, let's get this all uploaded," Dale instructed, fingers flying over the keyboard. In that moment, the sheer urgency of their mission transformed into something more profound than Marcus had expected. He realized that he wasn't merely leveraging facts against an enemy. He was reclaiming his own narrative and, in doing so, possibly rekindling a movement that had long been suppressed. "Are you ready to move?" Daniel asked, his focus unwavering. Each second felt like a countdown, and as the last bits of data filtered through, adrenaline coursed through Marcus's veins. This was about taking their lives back from those who had tried to demolish the foundation he'd fought to build. "Ready as ever," he replied, heart pounding with conviction. The transformations that had occurred within him formed a solid foundation now, self-belief and accountability. The fear was still palpable, but it had transformed into something he could harness. With their evidence now secured, Marcus took a deep breath and stared at their small team. "What we're doing isn't just about clearing my name, it's about shining a light on the lies they've spun to stifle growth. We intend to show our community that change is not just possible, but inevitable." Jessica smiled, and he could see shared faith reflected in her eyes. She had been with him throughout this journey, navigating the profound depths of vulnerability and strength. Together, they were stronger, not just as allies, but as advocates. As they moved out into the cool night air, Marcus felt a renewed purpose wash over him, flooding each limb with clarity. He was no longer just a target passed around the political chessboard. He was a player set to claim his rightful stakes. And as their group sped toward the gathering space where the evidence would be released to the public, Marcus mirrored Jessica's resolve. Though admittedly fraught with anxiety, he felt an unwavering confidence underpinning his actions. They were no longer hiding in the shadows. This was their moment. Hours later, the news broke wider than anticipated. The evidence revealed a nexus of corruption, stretching into the very fabric of the local government. Social media buzzed with reactions, and for the first time, the community rallied in solidarity, supporting Marcus's fight against injustice. The urgency that had once fueled trepidation now transformed into a collective call for action. As Marcus took to the podium, the warmth from the gathered crowd enveloped him. They were here because they believed in something greater, a community rising through advocacy, forever linked in their belief in equity. For Marcus, this was more than just speaking to faces. He was forging connections that could ripple across generations. In that poignant moment, he understood the profound shift within him. He had not only confronted daunting forces, he had galvanized a movement toward truth and collaboration. It felt transcendent, an achievement that finally honored the lessons of resilience ingrained in him. "I stand before you not as an isolated figure, but as part of a collective yearning for change, he declared, confidence surging. Together, we will dismantle the systems of oppression that bind us. Together, we will no longer allow our voices to be muted. The roar of applause that followed was a swell of affirmation, registering his personal growth. No longer just an advocate for the marginalized, but a beacon of hope for a unified future. It was a defining moment of reclamation, where the fears that once loomed now emerged as the stepping stones toward a broader victory. As the speech drew to a close, he felt the cool breeze brush past, refreshing yet invigorating. His heart thumped steadily against the chest, now a symbol of purpose and resolve. In this dance between shadows and light, he had chosen to stand as light, ready to seize the future he had fought valiantly to shape. The horizon now gleamed with promise, an affirmation that true agency lay not in reactive fear, but in the proactive pursuit of justice. They would continue to fight together, each driven by the belief that they were not just surviving, but thriving, ushering in a future where oppression would no longer triumph. And as he stood on the precipice of this new reality, he felt an undeniable urge pulsing through the atmosphere, urgently compelling all those who had followed his journey to take action within their own lives. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. This is the moment to show your support. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Your engagement matters. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to share. Only true fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.